Sometimes, it's not the shouting that hurts, it's the silence that follows. I still remember the sound of silverware clinking against plates, the smell of rice burning slightly in the pan because I'd left the flame too high, distracted, trying too hard to please. It was Sunday, and like every Sunday, I cooked lunch for the family. I always say it's the only day the house feels alive, but that day, whatever life was left in it, died for me. Henry, my son, arrived a little late with his wife and the boys. They brought laughter, the noise of toys, and those quick little conversations only people who live together understand. I had already set the table, arranged the flowers like I always did. It was my way of showing I still had a purpose. They sat down. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, scrolled through her phone while I tried to tell an old story. No one listened, but I was used to that, to the feeling of talking to myself. "Mom, can you stop insisting on these old tablecloths?" he said without even looking at me. "We bought a new set. You were supposed to use it." I looked at the white cloth with the blue embroidery, the one I made when I got married. I smiled, told him I liked using it because it brought good luck. He rolled his eyes. That's when I realized the love I thought still lived there was gone. Before I continue my story, I want to thank this channel for sharing it. And I'd like to ask you to support this channel by subscribing and liking this video. Also, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Lunch went on with broken sentences, rushed comments, and the couple's private laughter, until Henry, mouthful, said something I never imagined hearing from my own son. "You need to understand that time's passed, Mom. You're old now, you don't get to run things anymore. This house is my responsibility now. We can't depend on a useless old woman all the time." The words hung in the air, even the clock seemed to stop. The kids went quiet, Rachel looked down, and I just stood there, holding a plate, not sure if I should cry or pretend I hadn't heard. Useless old woman. The phrase echoed inside me like thunder. I didn't respond, no gesture, no sound. I just kept serving the rice as if nothing had happened. But inside, something in me collapsed, because it wasn't the word old that hurt the most. It was useless. Me who gave up my youth to raise him alone. Me who worked 40 years behind a fabric counter to pay for his education. Me who sold my shop so they could have a home. And suddenly, I was a burden. After lunch, they left without really saying goodbye. Said they needed to get some rest. I watched the gate close. The sound of the latch was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. That afternoon, I washed the dishes slowly, one by one. And with each clean plate, I scrubbed away another piece of my illusion. Useless old woman. I whispered it to myself, and I swore it would be the last time anyone called me that. In the days that followed, something in me shifted. I stopped trying to please, stopped asking if they wanted coffee, stopped waiting for company. I started watching in silence, and I discovered that silence is a powerful weapon. It doesn't scream, but it reveals. And the quieter I became, the more I saw how much they treated me like a weight. One day, while folding clothes in my room, I overheard Henry and Rachel talking in the hallway. "She needs to understand she's not going to live here forever," he said. "This house has to be in our name before anything happens." "But she donated all her savings, Danny." "It won't be easy," she replied. "I'll handle it. She's old, it'll be easy to register. We just need her signature." My heart froze. They were talking about me, about the house I bought, the roof I paid for with the sweat of my life. I closed the door quietly, sat down on the bed, and cried like I hadn't in years. Not because of the house, but because I realized the love I'd given had never come back. Yet, in the middle of those tears, a strange calm came over me. A cold, steady certainty took root inside. I wouldn't beg for respect. I would reclaim it my way. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed black coffee, no sugar, grabbed my purse, my keys, and the deed to the house. Then I went to the notary office. The clerk looked at me kindly. "Mrs. Grace, would you like to transfer the property?" "Yes." "To whom?" I looked out the window. Outside, the sun was rising beautifully, and I said, "Half will remain mine." "And the other half?" she asked, surprised. "To the Anna home," I said firmly. "A shelter for elderly women nobody wants around anymore." I signed the papers with a steady hand and a trembling heart. When I left the office, the wind brushed against my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. It wasn't revenge, it was a boundary. The invisible lock I finally needed to change. That night, Henry came for dinner. I could feel the tension in the air before he even spoke. Mom, did you go to the notary today? I did. What did you do? What needed to be done? He yelled, slammed his hand on the table, called me ungrateful, said I was destroying the family, but I didn't answer. I simply stood up, picked up his plate, and washed it in silence. The sound of running water was the only reply he deserved. Before leaving, he said, "You're losing your mind. You'll die alone, you useless old woman." And I just smiled. Because this time, the word didn't hurt. It only confirmed that I had done the right thing. When I closed the door, something felt different. Peace. A quiet, steady peace that comes when you finally choose yourself. Old, yes. Useless, never again. The worst part of humiliation isn't what they say. It's what keeps echoing after everyone's gone. That Sunday afternoon, after they left, the house felt bigger. Too big for one person. The children's voices still seemed to drift through the walls, but their laughter now, sounded like a distant memory. I stood for a long time, staring at the table. The plates still dirty, Henry's glass half full, the tablecloth stained with wine. I looked at it all and thought, this is how love crumbles between a dirty plate and a word that can't be taken back. I gathered the dishes and began to wash them. Slowly, each plate felt heavier than the last. The hot water burned my hands, but the silence burned more. Useless old woman. I kept repeating it without noticing, as if trying to get used to a new scar. I washed, dried, and put everything away. But even after the kitchen was spotless, the air still reeked of hurt. I opened the window to let the air in, and the breeze carried the scent of the garden. The flowers August had planted before he died were still, they're stubborn, steady. He used to say flowers were like strong people, they take the beating of the rain but bloom again. I looked at them and thought, do I still bloom, August, or have I already turned into nothing but buried roots? In the days that followed, life went on the same on the outside, but hollow on the inside. I cooked lunch, ironed clothes, watered the garden, but I did everything like someone serving a sentence. When Henry walked past me in the hallway, he pretended not to see me. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, spoke with that sweet, cold tone that cuts deeper than shouting. "Mrs. Grace, maybe you could stop fussing with those plants, huh? The boys' allergies get worse. The plants were here before they were born." Rachel, right. But time moves on, doesn't it? Everything changes. She smiled, but her eyes stripped me of any worth. It was the same look people give an old piece of furniture still useful, but taking up too much space. On Wednesday, I baked a cornmeal cake, Henry's favorite. I thought maybe the smell would bring back some good memories. I left the cake on the table with fresh coffee. He came home late, glanced at it, and said, "This has too much sugar, Mom. It's the same kind you used to eat when you were little." Well, we don't eat that stuff anymore. He grabbed an apple and went to his room without looking back. The sound of the door closing hurt more than the insult, because words offend, but indifference kills. That night I sat on my bed and looked at August's picture on the dresser. He was smiling, and I whispered, as if he could still hear me, "I raised Henry to be good, you know, to be fair, generous, like you were. Where did I go wrong?" The picture didn't answer, but the shadow on the wall looked like it was holding me. The next morning, I found Rachel in the kitchen. She was making a shopping list on her phone. "Mrs. Grace, could you give me your grocery card? I'll take care of everything." "Okay. My card." "Yes, just to make things easier. You don't need to worry about those things anymore." I kept looking at her, trying to figure out whether it was kindness or control. And I answered, calmly, "Thank you, dear, but I still know how to do my own shopping." She laughed. "I know, it's just that Henry prefers to keep the finances under control, you know. He worries." I smiled back, but inside my blood boiled. Control. That word sounded like a new kind of prison. That afternoon, I decided to go out, grabbed my purse, put on a blue dress, and walked to the bakery. I didn't need anything. I just wanted to move. As I walked, I realized how long it had been since I'd looked at the sky. It was a soft, clear, blue, peaceful, beautiful. And I thought, the sky doesn't age. We're the ones who convince ourselves it does. I bought fresh bread, exchanged a few words with the baker, and went back home. At the gate, I saw Henry's car pulling up. He didn't notice me. He was on the phone, irritated. "Yeah, Mom's stubborn. Thinks she still runs everything." My chest tightened, but I kept walking. I passed right by him, as if he were a stranger. And for the first time, I realized, maybe I really had become a stranger in my own son's life. That night, I dreamed about my old notions, shop shelves full of colorful threads, buttons, ribbons, lace. That was my world, small, but mine. I woke up with my eyes wet. I missed myself, the woman who worked late but slept peacefully, knowing she'd spent the day doing what she loved. Now, I worked all the time just to be tolerated in my own house. In the days that followed, I began to watch more closely. Henry's tone shifted whenever he talked about me. Rachel's gestures, the quick text messages she deleted whenever I walked into the room, and that strange feeling that something bigger was being planned in the shadows. But it wasn't fear. It was a new kind of calm, the kind that comes when you stop expecting love from a place that only offers convenience. Silence is a form of prayer, and sometimes God answers by opening our eyes. One afternoon, I heard the mailman knocking on the gate. He handed me a letter, Henry's name, but sent to this address. I didn't open it, but the envelope said, Property Registry Office. A chill ran down my spine. I held the envelope between my fingers, and in that instant, I understood, my silence would have to learn how to speak. I placed the envelope on the table, right beside the uneaten cornmeal cake, and whispered, maybe they've called me a useless old woman, but they're about to find out just how dangerous an old woman can be. When the truth comes to light, it doesn't scream. It simply opens the eyes of those who pretended not to see. That morning, the phone rang early. It was Dr. Peter, the lawyer who had helped me register the donation. His voice was calm but firm. Mrs. Grace, your son has filed a petition to reverse the deed. I imagined as much, I replied. And what do you think? I think he doesn't stand a chance, but you'll need to prepare for what comes next. I sighed. For what comes next? Those words echoed in my head for the rest of the day. That afternoon, when I went to the bakery for bread, I felt the stares. The neighbors whispered. One of them, Mrs. Lucy, came up to me with a tone of false concern. Oh, honey, is it true what people are saying, that you donated your house to a nursing home? I smiled, holding the still warm loaf. It's true, Lucy. Her eyes widened. But woman, what about your son? My son has a place to live. I was the one who no longer had a place to feel respected. She didn't answer. She just looked at me with that mix of curiosity and judgment. But I no longer cared. Because once you discover who you really are, other people's judgment loses its weight. In the following days, Henry didn't come by. Total silence. No call, no note. But my daughter-in-law Rachel sent me a short, cold message. You've gone too far. Henry is devastated. The whole family is talking. I hope you're happy now. I read it, deleted it, and went back to tending my plants. Their world was built on appearances, mine, on survival. And it was there, watering my ferns, that I understood. They didn't want the house, they wanted the power the house represented. The next week, I got an unexpected visit from Jane, my oldest granddaughter. She's 15, with sweet, curious eyes. She came in quietly, as if stepping into forbidden territory. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course, my flower. Is it true what Dad said, that you took the house away from us? I swallowed hard. How do you explain to a girl that taking and defending yourself are very different things? I sat with her on the couch and said, I didn't take anything, Jane. I just made sure no one could take anything else from me. She stayed quiet for a moment, then hugged me. A long, tight, honest hug, the kind that heals invisible cracks. I love you, Grandma, she said. I love you too, my flower. And in that embrace, I felt hope again. Not everyone inherits their parents' heart, but the calm didn't last long. The following Sunday, Henry showed up without warning. He banged on the door as if he wanted to tear it off its hinges. When I opened it, his eyes cut through me cold and furious. Have you lost your mind, Mom? I only did what I thought was right. Right? You call destroying everything we built right with? I asked, meeting his gaze. I don't remember seeing you behind the counter of my notions shop, son. His face turned red. The silence hung heavy. Then he spat out, almost shouting, You've always been bitter, always making a scene about everything. No one can stand you. That's why Dad was never home. That's why I never wanted to come back to this house. For a moment, it felt like the ground vanished beneath me. But I took a deep breath and simply said, Then go, Henry. What, go? If this house bothers you that much, then leave. You're kicking me out. No, my son. I'm just opening the door you already closed a long time ago. He stormed out, slamming the gate behind him, and I stood there, watching the wind move the curtains, the same wind that, years ago, rocked his cradle. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The sky was cloudy, but one stubborn star kept shining. I picked up a notebook and began to write. Not a letter of resentment, but a testimony. I wanted to leave in writing what I had learned too late. There are children we raise with love, and children we must set free through pain. In the days that followed, something curious happened. People started looking at me differently, some with disapproval, others with quiet admiration. But the ones who judged me also feared me, because there's a strange power in someone who refuses to bow anymore. I received a visit from Father John, an old family friend. He had coffee with me and said, "Grace, forgiveness is a long road. I know, Father, but before we can forgive, we have to find ourselves again. And have you found yourself?" "I'm on my way." He smiled, blessed my home, and left. He left behind a trace of piscine, a question that stayed with me for days. Would Henry ever understand what I did? But destiny has a curious way of testing us. A few days later, I received a certified letter. It was from his attorney. I opened it calmly, as one opens an old wound. The text stated that he was demanding his rightful share, claiming emotional incapacity on my part. I smiled, not out of mockery, but with a sad irony. Because that's what people do when they can't manipulate love. They try to discredit your sanity. They call you crazy so they don't have to ask for forgiveness. That night, I barely slept. I dreamed of my husband, August. In the dream, he was wearing an apron, making coffees just like he did on our happy Sundays. He looked at me and said, "Don't fear the emptiness, Grace." "But what if I end up alone?" I asked. "Loneliness is when you live surrounded by people who erase you. And now, live in peace, even if it's just you." I woke up crying, but my heart felt light. The dream felt like a message, and I decided that from then on, I would no longer live begging to be seen. The next day, I went back to the Anna home. I brought cakes, towels, flowers, and stories. The elderly women welcomed me, as if they'd been waiting for me for years. One of them, Mrs. Ruby, held my hand and said, "You know what's worse than getting old?" "What?" I asked. "Getting old in the wrong house." I smiled. And at that moment, everything made sense. The house I bought might no longer be mine alone, but for the first time in a long time, it was truly a home. When I returned that evening, I found an envelope on the floor, pushed under the door. I recognized my son's handwriting. I opened it. Inside, a short note: "You've destroyed me, but you won't stay on top for long." I looked up and through the window. I saw Henry standing across the street, watching, silent, as if the real confrontation had yet to begin. He took away my respect, and now he wants to take my peace, too. The shame that hurts the most isn't the one we feel. It's the one others invent for us. After finding that envelope and realizing what Henry was planning, something inside me cracked, but it didn't break. It was a different kind of crack, the kind that lets the light in. I began to walk slowly through the house, like someone studying a battlefield before the war. Every wall held a memory, every piece of furniture carried a story. Everything I had was here. And now, I realized, everything I was at risk too. 2 days later, the voices from the street began. They always start as whispers, then they become echoes. And finally, a verdict. At the bakery, the baker looked at me differently. His good morning came out awkwardly. At the butcher's line, 2 women spoke in low voices, not low enough. "Though, they say she's lost her mind. Poor thing. She sold her house to her son and now thinks he's trying to steal it." Old women living alone are like that. They start imagining things. I pretended not to hear, but their words clung to me like the smell of old grease. The next day I went to church. I needed to breathe. Father John saw me and smiled warmly, but right after the blessing, 2 ladies came up to me. "Mrs. Grace, are you doing all right?" "I am." "Why?" "It's just that Henry came by asking for prayers. Said, you've been confused." I felt my face burn. Confused. Another word used to erase women who refuse to stay quiet. I looked at them and replied calmly, "If you're going to pray for me, pray that I stay clear-headed enough not to be deceived." They looked embarrassed. I left with my head held high, but my heart was pounding. When I got home, there was a note taped to the gate. Hasty handwriting, no signature. "Careful, or you'll end up in a nursing home. Family is family." For a second, I felt anger, but then, I laughed, because without realizing it, that person had just given me the best idea of my life, though I wouldn't know that yet. Later that week, my old friend Mrs. Jane came to visit. She came in, gossip already on her tongue, as always. "Honey, you won't believe what people are saying." "I can imagine. They're saying Henry only wants what's best for you, and that you've become, how did they put it, bitter." "Oh really?" "Yeah. And that the house should be in his name anyway, just to avoid trouble." I sighed. "Funny how people worry so much about what isn't theirs. Well, you know how folks are." "I do. They'd rather talk about other people's lives than fix their own." She chuckled, but her eyes searched mine, curious. "So it's true, then, what he did. It's true. And if I hadn't found out in time, I'd be living as a guest in my own house." Jane went quiet, and for the first time, she looked at me with respect. By late afternoon, I sat on the porch. The wind carried fragments of street talk. Poor thing. Too proud for her own good. Such a difficult old woman. The words floated through the air like flies over an open wound. And that's when I realized, Di wasn't just fighting my son. I was fighting a world that believes old women are meant to bow their heads. That night, I heard a noise at the gate. I went out slowly. It was Henry. He stood on the sidewalk, his gaze hard and cold. "Why are you spreading lies about me, Mom?" "Me? I haven't said a word. Everyone's talking." "Then maybe the world has finally learned to listen better than you." He stepped closer, fists clenched. "You're embarrassing me." "Shame," I said quietly, "is trying to rob your own mother, and still expecting applause. So, that's it. You want a war. I want peace. But if war is the price, then let it come." His eyes filled with anger, but also with fear. Because in that moment he realized, I would never back down again. After he left, I was alone once more. The moon was full and bright, but it seemed to watch me with pity. I spoke to it, like someone speaking to God. They think they can defeat me by isolating me, but it's here, in the silence, that I find myself again. The next day, I met Father John on the street. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry so much about what people say, Grace." "Father, what they say doesn't worry me. Then what does?" "That women's silence keeps being mistaken for weakness." He looked at me with a sad smile. "Sometimes God gives a voice to those the world tries to silence. And sometimes, Father, He gives courage to the ones the world calls insane." That week, I made a secret decision. If they wanted to isolate me, I would surround myself on purpose, not with walls, but with dignity. I would return to the notary office, this time to make sure no one would ever take me away from myself again. On Friday, the phone rang. It was the notary office. The clerk recognized my voice. "Mrs. Grace, I'm sorry to bother you, but your son came by today." "And what did he want?" "He wanted to know if you'd already signed the new document." "What new document?" "One that cancels the previous deed." "He said you authorized it." My blood ran cold. I looked in the mirror and saw my own face, tired, firm, but clear-minded. I grabbed my purse and said softly, but with steel in my voice, "Then, today's the day this useless old woman shows what clever really means. Not every war needs shouting. Some are fought in the eyes of those who've learned to stay silent with wisdom." After that note was left at my door, the air in the house was never the same. It felt like even the walls were afraid to breathe. I started closing the windows earlier, locking the gate twice, and sleeping with the radio on just to hear a voice that wasn't silence. Henry never came to see me again, but I knew he was around. Sometimes I'd see his car parked at the corner, engine off, headlights dark. He'd sit there for a while, and then disappear. It wasn't the kind of presence that comforts, it haunted. On Monday, the lawyer called again. "Mrs. Grace, your son has formally filed a petition to cancel the donation." "Can he do that?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "He can try, but he'll need to prove you were deceived or incapable. Then he'll have to lie," I replied, half smiling. "Would you like to make a public statement?" "No. I'd rather defend myself with elegance." He chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that recognizes the quiet strength of someone who's lived too long to fear scandal. That night, I made coffee. But not for myself. I set 2 cups on the table, like I used to when August was alive, and I spoke aloud. "You know, my love, it feels like I'm fighting against my own blood." The cup sat still, steam rising slowly, and in that steam, I saw his face smiling, calm, as if saying, "Don't fight against blood, Grace. Fight for what flows within it, your dignity." In the days that followed, I began to notice strange things. A clerk at the notary office mentioned someone had requested a copy of my deed. A neighbor said he'd seen Henry talking to a real estate agent. And at the grocery store, I heard my name whispered between aisles. That's the one who went crazy and gave away her house. I smiled to myself. People love to call bravery madness. It helps them feel safer in their own cowardice. But what truly hurt wasn't the gossip. It was seeing how disrespect started seeping into the smallest things. One day, I went to the bank to withdraw my pension. The manager, a young man, asked if I had authorization from my son to access my account. Authorization, yes, he called, saying you might be having cognitive difficulties. My anger rose hot and sharp. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Cognitive difficulty is confusing love with control. Young man, I'm sorry, Mrs. Grace, I didn't mean just give me my money. And here's a bit of advice. Never trust anyone who tries to protect you by taking away your power." I walked out trembling. Not with fear, with indignation. In the days that followed, I prepared my response. But it wouldn't come in anger. It would come with grace. I went back to the Anna home, spoke with the director, Mrs. Lauren, and made her an offer she could hardly believe. "I want you to use my house for a fundraising event." "But Grace, are you sure?" "I am. I want people to see what love looks like when there's still some left after the family's gone." She cried, and so did I. But it was a clean kind of crying, the kind that has purpose. The event was set for the following Sunday. Flyers went up. The neighbors talked, and suddenly my house, the same house Henry called a burden, became the heart of something beautiful. When he found out, he came storming in, furious. He showed up in the middle of the afternoon, before the event, and barged in without knocking. "So you've finally lost your mind, haven't you? Turned the house into a nursing home." "In a home," I corrected calmly. "The difference is that here, no one has to ask to be heard." He stepped closer, face red, eyes burning with the kind of fury that wants to win, not understand. "This is humiliation, Mom." "No, Henry. Humiliation is when a son calls his mother a useless old woman. This," I gestured around us, "is just the consequence." For a moment, I thought he might shove me. But something in my eyes stopped him. Maybe, for the first time, he saw what he'd refused to see all along, that I was no longer afraid of him. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. And when it shut, the wind slipped through the window, carrying the smell of coffee and the laughter of the women arriving for the event. That Sunday was beautiful. The porch was full of voices, old songs playing, stories traded like gifts. The women from the Anna home sang, laughed, danced. Some got emotional just to sit at the table and hear their own names spoken aloud. As I watched them, I realized something. I wasn't just giving my house back to the world. I was reclaiming my place in it. When the celebration ended, I sat in my chair on the porch and closed my eyes. The breeze brushed my skin like a gentle hand, and I thought, the war is far from over. But for the first time, I'm not fighting alone. 2 days later, I received a court notice. Henry was filing for partial guardianship, claiming I was emotionally unstable. I smiled. Attempts to discredit are always the last resort of those who've lost control. But I didn't react with anger. I folded the document carefully and placed it inside a box of old letters, alongside photos from his baptism. I kept it there to remind myself that even the most painful kind of love is still love. That same day, Mrs. Lauren came to visit. She brought flowers and a simple cornmeal cake. We sat at the table, and she asked, "And now, Grace, now, my friend, time will speak for me, and your heart, hurt but free." And when the heart is free, even pain changes shape. They wanted my house, but in the end, they gave me back to myself. On a rainy night, I received an unexpected call. It was the director of the Anna home, her voice tense. "Mrs. Grace, your son was here today." "Henry, what did he want?" "He said he needed to talk to you. About the will." Silence. My heart raced. There was something in that phrase about the will that sounded like both a threat and a plea for forgiveness. "He's come back to find me. But this time, I'm no longer the woman he left behind. When they try to erase your name, it's because it still carries weight." The first time I saw my name on a document I didn't recognize, a chill ran down my spine. There it was, Grace Ribeiro de Andrade declared incompetent. 3 words spat out by someone who had never seen me live a single day of my life. Incompetent. That word echoed in my mind all day long. as if 70 years of survival could be erased with a stamp. It all began the morning after that phone call from the notary office. I arrived early, clutching my purse to my chest. The clerk greeted me with that polite, distant tone reserved for the elderly, as if we were children who'd forgotten our place. "Are you here to confirm a request?" "I'm here to know who tampered with my documents." "One moment." He typed something, frowned, and said, "There's a revision request here filed by your son, and was it approved?" "It's still under review." But he attached a medical report. I stared at him. "What kind of report?" "I'm not sure, but it mentions memory lapses." I laughed. Not a light laugh, a bitter one. The kind that comes when you realize just how bold your own blood can be. I left the notary office with the sun burning my skin. But what really burned was the contempt. I went straight to the clinic where he'd claimed that evaluation had been done. I got the document, and there it was, a forged signature. Poorly done, shaky, but with my name. The same name he used to write on school forms when he was a boy and I was the one protecting him. I looked at the stamp, at the cold letters, and thought, I tried to teach him what character means. He learned how to forge affection. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and spread out every paper I had. The deed, my ID, my tax number, bills, old photographs. It felt like putting together a puzzle of my own life. And I realized that while he was trying to erase my signature, I'd been erasing my own traces for years. I signed checks but let him manage the money. I kept memories but let him decide which ones were worth remembering. When you give everything in the name of love, the other person learns to take without ever asking permission. Late that afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived. Henry's lawyer, a young man, well-dressed with a polite, rehearsed smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Grace. I'm here on behalf of your son to clear up a few misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" "Yes. Henry's very worried about you. He's afraid someone might take advantage of you." The patronizing tone hurt more than the words themselves, but I stayed calm. "Sir, do you know what it's like to grow old and still be lucid?" "Excuse me. It's watching the world treat you as if you'd forgotten how to think." He smiled nervously. "That's not it, Mrs. Grace. Your son just wants to make sure everything is properly handled." "Then tell him this. What's already settled doesn't need handling." He cleared his throat, pulled a folder from his briefcase, and laid out a document. "If you could just sign here, we can close the case and avoid any unpleasantness." I took the paper, read it slowly, and there it was again, Gracie Veiru Gendraji. But it wasn't my name, it was a trap. The text said I agreed to the full transfer of property to the rightful heir. I looked him straight in the eye. "Do you have a mother, sir?" "Yes." "Then tell her I didn't sign this because I still own my own mind." I folded the paper firmly and handed it back. "And if my son wants to call me crazy, let him. He's already hurt me enough for one lifetime." He tried to speak again, but my stare silenced him. He left without another word. That night, I opened the window and looked at the sky. The wind carried the smell of wet earth. Far away, a storm was forming, but inside me, the weather was finally clearing. I sat on my bed and wrote a letter, not to him, to myself, to remember who I was before they called me a useless old woman. My name is not just a set of letters, it's the story of a woman who survived being forgotten. I placed the letter inside my Bible, between the pages of Psalm 91, because even God needs to read, once in a while, what we endure in silence. 2 days later, I received a summons, a conciliation hearing. Henry wanted to settle things as a family. The irony made me smile. Family, that's the pretty word selfishness uses when it wants to look like love. I entered the room with a steady step, hair tied back, wearing my blue dress. He was there, in a suit, impatient, with the same lawyer beside him. The judge looked at me gently, perhaps with pity, but I didn't need pity. I needed space to speak. "Mrs. Grace, do you confirm that you donated half of your property to a charitable institution?" "I confirm." "And were you aware of the legal consequences?" "I was, and the moral ones too. Your son claims you were misled." "Misled? Yes, by a lifetime believing that love means obedience." The judge shifted in his chair. Henry let out a loud sigh. "You're exaggerating, Mom." I looked straight at him. "Exaggeration, son, is a grown man trying to steal his own mother's past." The room fell into complete silence. The judge cleared his throat and jotted something down. "I believe," he said slowly, "that this woman knows exactly what she's doing." On the way out, Henry's lawyer caught up with me in the hallway. You won. I didn't want to win. Then, what did you want? Just the right to sign my own name without needing permission. When I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror. The wrinkles seemed deeper, but my eyes were alive. For the first time in a long time, I saw strength where I used to see exhaustion. And I realized that when the world tries to erase your name, what truly remains is what you build within it. Self-respect. That night, Henry sent a message. We need to talk. It'll be different this time. I deleted it without replying. Then I looked at August's picture and whispered softly, now that he knows he can't take my name, he'll try to take my heart. Some people come back asking for forgiveness. Others come back to see if they can still hurt you. When the director of the Anna home told me Henry had shown up there, my hands went cold. The seconds that followed were long and heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Did he say why he wanted to see me? I asked. He said he needed to talk about the will. He seemed nervous, but respectful. That word sounded almost like a joke. I hung up the phone and stood in the living room, staring at the clock on the wall. The hands pointed to almost 7 in the evening, the same hour I used to wait for August to come home from work. Back then, the sound of the key turning in the door meant life returning to the house. Now, every sound in the lock reminded me that home had become a battlefield. An hour later, he arrived. Didn't knock, didn't call, just walked in, with that same confidence of someone who still believes everything inside belongs to him. His face was tired, beard untrimmed, eyes hollow, but his posture still the posture of a man who doesn't know how to bow. You're not going to throw me out, he started. Not tonight. So you want to hear what I have to say. I want to hear what time has done to you, Henry. He took a deep breath, looked at me like he was measuring the distance between us, and finally sat down. The silence between us was thick. Then he said, I went to the Anna home because I found out you made a will. You found out. I never hid it. So it's true. You left everything to those old women. Old women, the word echoed like another one I knew, too well useless. They're women, Henry. Women the years have bruised, the same way your words bruised me. This is revenge. No, this is justice. Justice. You're destroying your own family. No, my son. The family destroyed itself the moment it started measuring love in property deeds. He lowered his eyes, but when he spoke again, his voice had turned cold. The lawyer says it can still be reversed. I won't stop you from trying. You don't understand. I just want to make sure the inheritance stays in the family. And I just want to make sure respect stays where it should have never been lost. For a brief moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd run through the kitchen asking for cornmeal cake and a hug. But now he was a man trying to negotiate love with paperwork. He looked around the house, at the worn-out couch, the old clock, the fading photos on the wall. You know what hurts the most, Mom? He asked, voice trembling. What is it? You don't trust me anymore? Trust, Henry, is like porcelain. You can glue it back together, but it never becomes whole again. We both fell silent. But his silence was guilt. Mine was freedom. Suddenly, he pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled sheet of paper. It's the doctor's report. I went and checked. You're perfectly healthy. No signs of any limitation. And why does that surprise you? Because I needed to see it with my own eyes. And what did you see? A woman I don't recognize anymore. Maybe that's because this woman, Henry, was never truly seen before. The air between us was heavy, like smoke. He straightened up, fixed his tie, took a slow breath. I'm willing to make a deal, Mom, a deal. If you revoke the donation, I promise I'll take care of you. Promise, I swear. The laugh escaped before I could stop it. It wasn't mocking, just disbelief. Take care of me, Henry. It's the least I can do. The least would have been never having to promise that at all. He lowered his head, but his eyes hardened again. You won't live forever. And when you're gone, who gets all this? Those women from the shelter. They'll get whatever's left, yes. And your name. My name is already written where it belongs, in the conscience of the one who disrespected it. The conversation ended with him slamming the door. But this time, the sound didn't hurt. It was freeing. Every door that closes also protects. The next morning, I found another envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a copy of my will, and a letter from him. Mom, I'm trying to understand, but I can't accept this. What you're doing is madness. If Mr. August could see it, he'd be ashamed. My hands trembled. But I took a deep breath and wrote back calmly, "My son, if August were alive, he'd defend me. Because he was the first to teach me that a house without respect is just bricks and cement. And shame, Henry, is a son trying to erase his mother from her own story." I folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and went to the garden. The flowers I'd planted months before were blooming, small, fragile, but stubborn, just like me. The next day, the lawyer came by. He told me quietly that the judge had dismissed Henry's case, lack of evidence and bad faith, the ruling said. I smiled. Not out of victory, but in silent justice, the kind of triumph that doesn't need applause. But peace didn't last. Rachel began showing up around the neighborhood, telling people I was manipulating old women for attention. Some believed her, others just looked at me with pity. And in that atmosphere of whispers and tension, my birthday arrived. 70 years, 70 winters, and a heart that had finally learned how to bear the cold. Among the flowers and simple messages from the women at the Anna home, I received an unexpected invitation. A note left at the gate, written by Henry. "Mom, I want to honor you. We're hosting a family dinner to celebrate your 70th birthday. Please come. Let's try to start over." I read it again and again. For a moment, my heart wanted to believe it. But my soul had already learned to read between the lines. Let's start over often means let's pretend nothing ever happened. Still, I decided to go. Not out of naivety, but because sometimes you have to show up, so silence doesn't end up telling the wrong version of your story. Some wars end without a winner. But this one wasn't over yet. In the mirror, as I got ready for the dinner, I saw something new in my reflection. Not vanity, strength, peace. I picked up my keys, locked the door, and whispered, "Tonight, they're going to see that the useless old woman has learned how to defend herself. There are pains we don't scream about. We just set the table and let the truth sit with us." I arrived at Henry's house just as the sun was going down. The street glowed under warm yellow lights, and the porch was decorated with flowers and balloons. Everything looked beautiful, almost perfect, too perfect to be sincere. The door was open. I heard laughter, soft music, the clinking of glasses. For a second, I thought about turning back, but then his voice stopped me. "Mom's here." Everyone turned. I stood at the entrance. A single second of silence sliced through the room, the kind that comes right before the fake applause. Rachel was the first to approach, wearing a practiced smile. "Mrs. Grace, what a joy to have you." "Joy is not being forced to be here," I answered, smiling just as sweetly. She pretended not to understand, took my purse and led me to the table. Everything was set to perfection. New tablecloths, crystal glasses, a huge cake with the number 70 on top. And above the table, a silver banner read, "Family is everything." I almost laughed. Family is everything. Until respect runs out. Henry gave me a quick hug, avoiding my eyes. I caught his scent, the same one he wore when he was young. It smelled like memory and distance. "I'm glad you came, Mom. I came because I want to hear what you have to say. Nothing much. I just want peace." Peace. The word sounded far too pure to fit in his mouth. We sat down, the dishes were served. The conversations were shallow, rehearsed, full of hollow compliments, but I noticed the sideways glances, the whispers at the edges of the room. I knew many were there just to witness the show of reconciliation. At the center of the table, Henry raised his glass and said firmly, "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Today we celebrate the life of the woman who gave me everything: love, education, even the roof over our heads. Despite our differences, I have never stopped respecting my mother." The last sentence was aimed directly at me, an attempt to rewrite history in front of an audience. I felt my blood boil, but I stayed quiet, because sometimes silence sharpens the blade. He went on, "I know we've had disagreements, but I want you all to know that everything I've done was to protect our family, and if, in any way, I've made mistakes, I asked for forgiveness." A few polite claps broke the air. I looked around, everyone smiling, emotional, but they didn't know. Most of what he'd just said was a lie. I picked up my glass, stood slowly. My hands trembled, but my gaze was steady. "May I say a few words?" I asked. The room went silent. Even the children stopped laughing. "Of course, Mom," Henry replied, confident. "You deserve the floor." I stepped forward. The click of my heels echoed through the room. I took a breath and began, "It's strange, hearing my own son talk about respect. Because a few months ago, at this very same table, he called me a useless old woman. The air vanished. A wave of murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Rachel's face go pale, Henry's jaw tighten, but I kept going. I stayed silent that day. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't react, because I learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than any scream. I looked straight at him. He looked away. But silence doesn't erase what was said. And when a mother is humiliated in her own home, she dies a little on the inside. A collective sigh filled the room. Some guests lowered their heads, others looked at me with tears in their eyes. That's why, I continued, I decided that respect would no longer be something I asked for. I earned it back the only way I could. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, the same copy of the property deed. I opened it in front of everyone and laid it on the table. This house, I said, pointing to myself, is protected. No one will ever again decide what I deserve. And if anyone here still doubts what love really means, read this document. Half of this home belongs to those who still know how to care without ever needing to humiliate. Absolute silence. I could hear the heavy breaths, the scrape of chairs, the tremor Henry tried to hold back. He shot up from his seat. This is theater. Mom, you just want to humiliate me. No, Henry. I only wanted to return the words you once gave mean, now cleaned. You've destroyed everything. I rebuilt what was left. The tension burst. Rachel tried to intervene, crying. Guests stood up, some discreetly filmed with their phones, but I stayed standing unshaken. You've changed too much, he said. No, my son, I just stopped accepting crumbs and started serving myself whole. I picked up my purse. Before leaving, I looked one last time at the table, the same table that, months ago, had been the stage of my humiliation. And I said, softly, that day, you took away my right to speak. Today, I took away your power to silence me. I turned my back and walked out. Behind me, I heard muffled sobs and confused whispers, but outside, the air was light. I took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The moon was full, bright, round, whole, just like I felt in that moment. I got home late that night, turned on the lights, made tea, and sat on the porch. The street was quiet. The flowers swayed gently in the wind. And I thought, the most important lock I ever changed wasn't on the door. It was on my heart. I smiled. Because, finally, I understood. Freedom doesn't come when someone else repents. It comes when we forgive ourselves for staying silent for too long. The next morning, I got an unexpected message on my phone. It was from Henry. Just one sentence. Can I stop by for a cup of coffee? I looked at the screen, took a deep breath, and murmured, forgiveness sometimes arrives slowly, but when it does, the heart recognizes it. No one talks about the silence that follows the scream. It's heavy, dense, and sometimes crueler than the humiliation itself. That night, after the dinner, I walked home slowly. The sound of my heels on the pavement matched my heartbeat, slow, steady, tired. The lights from the houses passed by like blurred memories. Some people looked out their windows. Others drew their curtains. That's how truth works. Everyone wants to hear it, but few dare to see it up close. I opened the gate, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. The house greeted me in silence. A different kind of silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but of cleansing, as if the air itself had been purified after the storm. I sat on the porch, took off my shoes, and breathed deeply. And I thought, I don't regret it. But it hurts. By the next morning, the whole neighborhood already knew. Gossip travels faster than forgiveness. At the bakery, people whispered, church. They whispered softer, but they still whispered. And at the pharmacy, I heard it clearly. That's the woman who humiliated her son in public. Funny, no one says, the son who humiliated his mother, because the world still finds it noble when a man commands, and shameful when a woman answers back. I smiled to myself, because I've learned that sometimes, the price of standing tall is being called crazy, ungrateful, or dramatic, and that's all right. Better to be called too much than to be called silent. That afternoon, Mrs. Jane showed up, the same one who, weeks earlier, brought gossip the way others bring flowers. Now her eyes were wet. Honey, what was that, woman? The truth, I answered. But did it have to be like that? In front of everyone? It did. He's devastated. I spent years devastated. Now it's his turn to think about what he's done. She fell quiet, then sighed. I don't think I'd have had the courage. Neither did I, and was it worth it? Telling the truth always is, even when no one claps. That night, the phone rang. I didn't answer. Then came the sound of messages. 1, 2, 5, 10. From unknown numbers. Some called me brave, others cruel. I read them all. And I realized something. The world can't stand seeing a woman say enough without apologizing right after. 2 days later, I had an unexpected visitor, Father John. He wasn't in his cassock, just the calm, kind eyes of someone who understands without judging. May I come in, Grace? Of course, Father. He sat down, asked for coffee, looked around, and said, Henry came to talk to me. My heart skipped. And what did he say? That he's lost, that his pride has become a burden, that you hurt him. Hurting him was never my intention, I know, but sometimes the truth cuts in order to heal. I stayed silent. He took a sip of coffee and went on. He still hasn't understood everything, but he's starting to look inward, and that's where repentance begins. My eyes stung, not with guilt, but with relief, because maybe, just maybe, love still had a chance. The next day, the neighborhood began to shift. Some women avoided me, others approached out of curiosity, and slowly, I noticed something. The same people who once called me proud were now calling me strong. The strength of women offends until it becomes a trend. One afternoon, Jane, my granddaughter, appeared at the gate, shy, alone, holding a small bag in her hand. Grandma, can I come in? Of course, my flower. She came in, sat on the porch chair, and stayed quiet for a while. Then she said softly, I saw the video. Video. Someone filmed the dinner. It's all over the group chats. My chest went cold. And what are people saying? Some call you brave, others say you destroyed the family. And you, what do you think? She looked me straight in the eyes and answered without hesitation, I think you said what everyone else is too afraid to. I held her hand. In that simple gesture, I found redemption. Because truth may divide a generation, but it can save the next one. That night, I sat alone and reread the letter I'd written long ago, the one I kept inside the Bible. The words felt more alive than ever. My name is not just a set of letters, it's the story of a woman who survived being forgotten. And I realized I hadn't just survived being forgotten, I had survived judgment, guilt, and the shame others tried to hand me. Days later, I saw Henry on the street. It was brief, just a meeting of eyes at a traffic light. He stopped the car and rolled the window down. For a moment, I thought he would pretend not to see me. But he didn't. He looked straight at me and said, I saw the video too, and it hurt. The truth always does, son, but sometimes it heals. The light turned green. He drove away without another word. But that brief exchange was worth more than any apology could ever be. When love matures, it doesn't need to shout. It recognizes itself in the eyes of someone who's finally learned to listen. That night, I slept in peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because, for the first time, the weight of guilt wasn't mine alone. And in the quiet of the early hours between the faint noise of the city and the wind brushing the window, I realized something. The respect I had reclaimed wasn't just mine. It belonged to every woman who once stayed silent to keep the peace, and lost herself in the process. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the window, spilling over the breakfast table. Amid the flowers, my phone buzzed. A new message, from him. Can I stop by for a cup of coffee? I looked at the screen, smiled softly, and thought, after the scream comes the right kind of silence, the kind that doesn't hurt, only reminds you your heart is still alive. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It's looking at your pain and saying, you don't own me anymore. The phone buzzed on the table. The message was still there. Can I stop by for a cup of coffee? I read it once, twice, 3 times. My heart beat slowly, like it was both afraid and hopeful at the same time. Henry, the same son who once called me a useless old woman, who tried to erase my name from papers and memories. But now, he was the one asking to come in. And for a second, in the glow of those words, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: regret. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle. As the water began to boil, the steam drew shapes in the air. They looked like memories, me and him, laughing with his father, sitting on the floor, eating warm cornbread straight from the pan. The sound of laughter mingled with the hiss of the kettle. Time is strange, I thought. It destroys what we love, but it can also mend what once seemed impossible. A little later, I heard the sound of the gate. This time, it didn't startle me. It echoed softly. The key turned, and he walked in slowly, without arrogance, clean-shaven, red-eyed. He brought no flowers, no gifts, only the weight of what he hadn't said before. Hi, Mom. Hi, Henry. Silence. A silence that for the first time didn't hurt. He looked around. The house was simple, but alive. The garden flowers bloomed brighter than ever. On the table, 2 cups facing each other. It looks different here, he said. So do I replied. I sat down. He stood for a moment, not knowing what to do with his hands. Then he sat. The coffee steamed between us, its scent filling the air with equal parts sweetness and memory. He spoke first. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the dinner. Have you? Yeah. And as much as it hurt, I realized that everything I tried to do, it all came from fear. I looked at him. Fear. Fear of losing you, of being alone. Then why did you push me away? Because that's what fear does, Mom. It confuses love with control. His words came slow, sincere. For the first time, they didn't sound like excuses. They sounded like confession. I ruined everything, he said, his voice breaking. No, Henry, you just taught me how far I can go for love. And how far is that to the edge of my own respect? He lowered his head. 2 tears fell onto the table. And I, who had cried alone so many times, knew this was my moment to dry his tears. I touched his hand. A simple gesture, but whole. Mom, he whispered. I called you a useless old woman. And I forgave you. That easy. It wasn't easy, son. There were long nights, heavy days. Then why? Because I don't want to die chained to what you said. I want to live free for who I chose to become. After he cried. And so did I. But it was a clean, gentle cry, one of new beginnings. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wound. It just stitches it back together with stronger thread. We sat in silence for a while. The wind tapped against the window, carrying the scent of garden flowers. The coffee grew cold, but our hearts warmed. Henry took a deep breath. I went to the Anna home. I know you do. I do. And I'm glad. Yes, because there, you saw what I wanted you to see. That the love left over is never lost. It just finds a new address. He smiled for the first time in a long while. A tired smile, but a real one. Before leaving, he hugged me. Not the polite kind. A long, tight hug, the kind that says someone has finally understood the value of being present. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my son. Can I come back another day? You can, but promise me something. What's that? That next time, bring your heart light, not the keys to the house. He laughed softly, and that laugh sounded like an old song coming back to life. After he left, I stood there, watching the gate close, but this time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt peace. The kind of peace that comes not from winning or losing, but from being free. I walked out to the garden. The flowers swayed in the wind, and the sky began to change color. I picked up my empty coffee cup and looked toward the horizon. Life is strange. Sometimes it takes away everything you love just to return what truly matters, yourself. I smiled. And I thought that, if someone ever called me old again, I'd answer proudly, old, yes, but whole. Because those who learn to respect themselves never really grow old. The greatest lock I ever changed was the one that kept me from being happy. I'd like to thank the channel Buried by My Family for sharing my story. Support this channel, subscribe and share this video, because there's always a new story here, and who knows, maybe one of them is just like yours. And if you've ever been through something similar, tell me in the comments.